First, I want to say Yasher Koyach to the organizers of this event. I don't know what I could add to the B'tochen and the Amunah, because I may be a big rabbi, but I'm a little tiny insect next to the energy and the sincerity of the people who are organizing this and that are involved with this. I'm humbled. I would just add one nekuda, not that I'm saying that this nekuda is lacking. There's a minig that when you join a salad, you add a spice of your own. It's very, very important that all of these things don't be tech simcha. A lot of simcha, a lot of joy, which means practically that in spite of the fact that there are so many things in the world that challenge us, and these challenges make it heavy, make our life heavy. In other words, they make us want Mashiach for the wrong reasons. We're not supposed to want Mashiach because life is bad. We did that for 2,000 years. Now we want Mashiach because Mashiach's a good idea. So this is a special avodah, not an easy one, but a special avodah, that on top of everything else, we look at our life and we say, Baruch Hashem, what we have, and we want Mashiach. Not chas v'sholem that we're being mamayit, that we're not sensitive to the challenges that we face. But our desire for Mashiach is based on something much more and much higher, much more positive and much more optimistic. And the most important thing is we should actually have the Hisgalos of Melech HaMashiach, and we should celebrate b'simcha of Tov Levag with a lot of atzlocha. I love the fact that you included the 12 psukim, I must say. I heard that Greis Chasidim, the big Talmidei Chachamim, would sit in the car and review the 12 psukim. When the rebbe made the campaign of the 12 psukim, Yidden with white beards would memorize the 12 psukim and they would repeat them, because if the rebbe was into it for children, there's a child in each one of us. But the idea that the 12 psukim are Shmira, this is news to me. I'm going to try it, and in Rit Hashem it'll work. Okay, my topic is talk about the Beis Hamikdash. It is the 3 weeks, and the rebbe made a very big campaign that we should learn about Beis Abchira, about the Beis Hamikdash. The rebbe himself participates by learning the Rambam and Hilchas Beis Abchira, even though there's also the Mishnayos and there's also the Yecheskel. The rebbe participated by giving many sichas on the Rambam and Hilchas Beis Abchira. And of course, the Rebbe quoted a medrash that we're all familiar with, that the medrash says that it's based on a pasuk in Yecheskel, of course, that because my bias, my house, is destroyed, so therefore my house should be idle. And he said to the Novi Yecheskel that he should write and teach about the building of the Beis Hamikdash. And the medrash implies that learning about the Beis Hamikdash is not only in the category of meaning we can't build the Beis Hamikdash, so learning about the Beis Hamikdash is like learning about a carbon which you can't bring. So by learning about the carbon, it's as if we brought the carbon. By learning about the Beis Hamikdash, it's as if we built the Beis Hamikdash. But the Medrash says that learning about Beis Hamikdash actually builds the Beis Hamikdash. It actually builds the Beis Hamikdash. So I want to give, I guess you can call it a bit of a shiur. I'm going to talk a little bit about Beis Abchira, about the Beis Hamikdash. And I was warned not to get too technical. If I get too technical, I'll put people to sleep, including myself. I can put myself to sleep under all conditions. I have an equal opportunity sleeper at this point in my life. So I want to share this. The first thing is that if you look at the design of the Beis Hamikdash, you'll see that the Beis Hamikdash was designed to reflect the home that people live in. Beis Hamikdash was designed just like a human being has a house, Hashem has a house. Just like a human being's home has a variety of different rooms, the Eibush also has a variety of different rooms, and the Eibush's house reflects the home that people themselves have. And there's two levels in this. The lower level in this is that because people live a certain way, the Eibush says, I want to live the same way. And the higher level of this, the truer level of this, is because the Eibush, before he created the world, created the Torah, and he wrote into the Torah, this is how the Beis Hamikdash is going to be, So people live this way as a reflection of how the Beis Hamikdash was built before creation. Even though the Beis Hamikdash wasn't built for thousands of years after the world was created, but the way people build their homes, mazlachazi, not knowing why, reflected how the Eibishter planned for his house to be if and when his home would be built, even though it was built many, many years later. And the design of the home, the design of the Eibishter's Beis Hamikdash, basically is that it has three areas, three spaces. There's obviously many more spaces, and the fancier the Beis Hamikdash got, the more spaces there were. But ostensibly, basically, there's three spaces. In the times of the Shas, in the times of the Gemara, which the Yeshiva Bachrim learn, people used to have a chotzer, a courtyard. And the courtyard was in front of the house. It wasn't behind the house, it was in front of the house. And the closest thing that you and I know that would compare to a chotzer is what you would call today a garage. A garage is a place where a person keeps his tools and his machines and all the things that are greasy, and you're afraid they're going to make a mistake and mess in the house. You keep them in the garage. And in the garage you do the kind of work you wouldn't do inside a home. So in the olden times, this was called a chotzer, and it was in front of the house. And the chotzer was actually surrounded by a tall wall of stone, because people did things in that space which required sneas. People on the street should see what they were doing. In this chotzer, people had their ovens. They used to cook outdoors. They didn't cook inside their homes for various reasons. In this chotzer, they used to keep their animals. In this chotzer, they would keep the foods or the other materials that they had that were processing, that took time to develop. Like they would soak things in their chotzer. All kinds of more imprecise, not so clean work was done in the chotzer. And then, of course, in addition to that, you went into the home. There was a living area where people ate and drank and socialized and learned and davened and played. And then there is a place and a bedroom. So the Beis Hamikdash was designed to be exactly the same way. In the chotzer of the Beis Hamikdash, that's where the heavy lifting is done, so to speak. That's where the karbanos were brought, because this represents the level of the life of a person that's correcting things in his life that are tougher and not so fine, and you do them, so to speak, outdoors. The heichal, the room where you had the Menorah and the shulchan and the mizbeach, this is the living area of the Eibishter. And then of Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, this is the place of privacy. This is the Cheder Amitas. This is the bedroom. So the Beis Hamikdash, the way the Eibishter designed the Beis Hamikdash, was reflective of how people live, or people live because that's how the Eibishter designed the Beis Hamikdash before he created the world. Now, I want to add one other thing when I'm talking about this, and that is that you look at a carbon. A person brought a carbon. So the carbon was, of course, an animal, it was meat. And along with the meat, you brought flour and oil and wine. The flour and oil is called the mincha, and the wine is called the nesech. And this again was meant to reflect how people live. A person eats a very, very festive meal, a very important meal. Obviously, he's not just going to eat meat. He's going to eat bread. So the mincha was representative of the bread. And he's going to eat meat, because in simcha ela b'basar, meat gives people joy. And then he's going to drink wine, because in simcha ela b'yayin, the Gemara says, joy, wine also brings joy. So the Eibishter's karbonos were, again, the same idea as I said before. On one level, you could say they reflect the way people eat a meal. On another level, people eat the meals the way they do, because this is how the Eibishter wrote into his Torah before he created the world. That when you bring a carbon, you bring it along with bread and wine. So we eat our meals in the same way, along with the bread and the meat. We also drink wine. And additionally, in a living area, in a place people live, you have a light, which is the Menorah. You have the shulchan, which is the place where the bread is kept. And you have the Ketoret. In the olden days, people used to use incense much more than they use today. In those times, Ketoret was not only used to create a good aroma, Ketoret was literally used as a perfume. The Gemara says that the smell of the Ketoret was so potent that Kalis in Yerushalayim did not have to put on perfume. the smell of the Ketoret, and it was a very pleasant smell, was so powerful that the entire city had this incredibly powerful aroma that Kalis, in the day of their chuppah, did not have to put on perfume. So the Beis Hamikdash was designed to reflect how people live. And I want to talk about this a little bit more deeply. And the way I'm going to present it to you is by talking about the fact that in the Beis Hamikdash there were 3 ishim, there were 3 fires. There were 3 fires that were burned in the Beis Hamikdash. And these 3 fires that were burned in the Beis Hamikdash reflect these 3 worlds, these 3 levels, the Chotzer and the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadosh. What were the 3 fires? So number 1, the first fire was the fire that burned karbanos, obviously, and the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach was a very, very large platform, and the Mizbeach had 2 or 3 fires, and in Yom Kippur they had 3 or 4 fires, and the fire, by the way, none of the fires were in the middle. When you pictured the Mizbeach, you imagined that in the middle of the Mizbeach there was a big, beautiful fire. That's not how it was. In the middle of the Mizbeach there was a big pile of ash that was called the tapuach, that was placed there poshut for yoifi. They wanted the Mizbeach to be pretty, so they would collect all the ash and they made it into a very, very large ball, and you could see it. It wasn't just a little tiny glob like a baseball. It was a massive, massive ball of ash. Periodically they carried it out. The Chazal say that there was a time that I think it took 300 koyanim to carry it out. It was incredibly large, and at some point they had to remove it and build a new ball of ash. This is what sat on the center of the Mizbeach. It was meant to make the Mizbeach beautiful. And the fires were off to the side. The fire that burnt karbanos was towards the east, towards Mizrach. The fire that was used for the Menorah and for the Ketoret was towards the west, was towards Ma'ariv. And there were large fires. The area of the fire could have been, let's say, 100 square feet. And they were feeding enormous amounts of wood to this fire. The fire had to be very, very hot, because they were burning fresh meat in copious amounts, a lot of meat. And they would feed this fire enormous amounts of wood, so the fire would be incredibly hot. They would throw on a fresh piece of meat or even a fresh behema, and the heat was so intense that the meat would dry quickly and burn. And it was a very, it's very dramatic thing to witness. If you went into the Beis Hamikdash and you saw the fire, the Mizbeach burning, you were seeing something very, very dynamic, very powerful, full of energy. And it certainly wasn't still, and it certainly wasn't quiet, and it certainly was not peaceful. Fire, I don't understand this very well, but fire has a tendency to create waves and reactions, and sometimes the fire alone can have such a force that it'll physically throw things off the Mizbeach. And the Chazal describe pieces of wood falling off the Mizbeach, pieces of meat pulling off the Mizbeach, and the whole question of when you put it back and how you put it back. They would put it back on the Mizbeach in most cases. But the fire was a very dramatic thing to witness. It was a very large fire. It was an incredibly hot fire. I don't know what temperature it was, but they had to keep it incredibly hot. They were burning fresh meat. And it was a very dynamic fire. It was a very lebedik of fire. And it let you know that it was there. It made a lot of noise. This was the first fire. The second fire was the fire of the Menorah. What do we know about the Menorah? The Menorah burned shemen zayizach, olive oil, which is absolutely pure. There was nothing else mixed into the oil except olive oil. And of course, pure olive oil, when it burns very beautifully and very peacefully. And they used the wicks that they used for the olive oil came from the baloi begodim. The koyanim wore clothing when they worked in the Beis Hamikdash. And the way the koyanim's clothing in the Beis Hamikdash worked was, when you became a kohen gadol at the age of 25, they gave you an outfit, they gave you a set. It was 4 pieces of beged. It was a shirt that was down to your ankles. It was a mikbas, it was a hat that would you wrap around your head like a turban, around and around and around, and it was in a conical shape. It was taller and narrower. You were given michnasayim, a pair of knickers, shorts, mimisnayim adirechayim, and a gartel, and the gartel was made of wool. And you were given your own set. You worked, the average kohen worked in the Beis Hamikdash 2 or 3 days per year. The average kohen worked in the Beis Hamikdash 2 or 3 days per year. We think about them being busy all the time. It was not how it was. There were 24 mishmores. Each mish was divided up into 7 batei av, so you got to work one day out of every 24. The exception was Yom Tov. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, any kohen could come and participate in the avodah of Yom Tov. But kohenim did not work in the Beis Hamikdash that much, and you had your own outfit, and you had to keep it clean. And when your day was over, you put it in special cubbies. Every mishmar had their own cubby, every Beis had their own cubby, and every beged had its own cubby, one for Ksenis, and one for Mitznefes, and one for Michnasayim, and one for Avneit. And when you came to the Beis Hamikdash the next time, you got your own clothing. Now, as far as I know, they didn't clean them. If a kohen's beged got dirty, or if a kohen's beged got worn out, they replaced it, because it had to be it had to be very, very beautiful. And the big day kahuna were made from linen, fine linen. So the first thing was the pele, koyanim zrizim heim, that the koyanim spent their entire day walking around in an environment that's filled with blood and other kinds of unpleasantries. The azara was not exactly, your kitchen was a lot cleaner than the azara before they cleaned it and mopped it. After they cleaned it, it was spick and span, but the azara was not exactly always looking perfect. And the kohenim walked around their environment. They spent the whole day being involved in bringing karbonis and the whole thing. And when the day was over, every kohen's outfit was as clean as it was when he put it on in the morning. There wasn't a speck on it, because kohenim had this special chush to do things very quickly and to do things in such a way that there was no spillage, there was no mistakes, there was no accidents. If you could remember, at a Pesach, they would make lines of kohanim, one line of gold beakers, one line of silver beakers, and they were sending these full beakers full of blood back and forth to sprinkle it on the mizbeach, and it didn't spill ever, not even a drop. Kohanim were famous for their zrizos, for their ability to do things very precisely, very exactly. But if and when a kohen's beged got old, it got worn, or if and when the kohen's beged became dirty, so they got him a new outfit, and the old outfit, they used it for the psilim, for the wicks that they used for the Menorah. So some of it was used for the Menorah, and some of it was used for Simchas Beis Hasheva. They used some of the baloi begotten with the Mechnasayim and the Mitznefes, I think, they used for the Simchas Beis Hasheva and the Avneit and the Mikdash. I could be wrong. They used the worn out begotten with the Kohen were used for the wicks that they burnt the Menorah, and those wicks were made from fine linen, so they were a good quality wick. So when you burn olive oil using a very good wick, it's an incredibly peaceful fire. The fire burns the wick and consumes the oil with no noise, no drama, no dynamism, no tumult. It's totally quiet, totally peaceful, it's totally harmonious, because the fuel wants to burn. The oil wants to be consumed by the flame. This is the second fire in the Beis Hamikdash. And the third fire in the Beis Hamikdash was the fire of the Ketoret, which was also brought in the Heichal, in the Kodesh. But of course it represented the Madreg of Kodesh HaKadoshim, and of course on Yom Kippur they actually brought it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, as we all know. And this third fire, the fire of the Ketoret, was also very, very quiet, very, very peaceful. They used to take coals from the burnt out wood in a special pan and put it on the mizbeach, and then they'd put the Ketoret on top of it, and the kohen had to be careful to sprinkle the Ketoret from far away to closer to him, because if we put the Ketoret in the part that was closer to him first, as he was reaching across to put the Ketoret at a more remote part of the pile of coals, he would get burned from the heat. So he had to sprinkle the Ketoret onto these coals from far to close. And by the way, I want to mention something very interesting as a parenthesis about the Ketoret, and that is that when the Ketoret was brought in the Beis Hamikdash every day, and also on Yom Kippur with the Kohen Gadol and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen went in alone. Nobody could help him. Number one, the average Kohen brought Ketoret in the Beis Hamikdash literally once in his life. You didn't get more than one chance in your life to do it. He didn't have a chance to prepare and to practice and to rehearse. And the Chazal say, that Rambam brings it down, avoidis koshes shohaya b'mikdash. One of the more difficult things was to bring the Ketoret and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And you went alone. Kol adam lo yeh ba'el meid. No Jew was allowed to participate. When the Kohen did the Ketoret, it was him and God. Like the Zayir, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai used to say, B'chad ketiris katarna b'yachidna b'litna b'yizdapkes. B'chad ketira, with one Ketoret. So the Ketoret, which the average Kohen did once in his life, it was him and God. No one was allowed to be in the same room. No one was even allowed to be in the adjacent room, into the next room. There had to be 2 rooms away. But when you burn Ketoret, not only is there no noise, there isn't even any flame. Ketoret burns like a cigarette, that it just embers. In other words, the fuel and the fire literally become one and the same thing. So the Beis Hamikdash has 3 rooms, and corresponding to these 3 rooms, you have 3 fires. And let's talk, I'm running out of time, I'll just say this very briefly. What is the union of these 3 fires? The fire, of course, represents Hashem Elokecha Eish Eichlu. The fire represents godliness. And the fuel represents the world. The Mizbeach burnt wood and meat. This represents the Yetzer Hara. This represents Taivus v'Tanugim, Taivus v'Tanugim. Moisture represents Taivus. And that's why this fire was so noisy and so dramatic. It was a big fight. It was a struggle between the fuel and the fire. Because the moisture in the meat and the moisture in the wood doesn't want to burn, and the heat of the fire wants to consume it, wants to eat it up. And in the Nimshal, the fire of Elokus wants to eat up, do a skafia on the Taivus of this world and so on. And that's why it's so dramatic. It's a fight. It's a struggle. It's a fight between Elokus and the behemoth within a person. The Menorah represents the level of Atzilus, a higher level, where there's no longer a struggle, where the struggle has been transcended. We're living in an environment of peace. And because the Menorah represents an environment of peace, the fire of the Menorah burnt, consumed the oil in such an incredibly peaceful way that it was totally quiet, totally comfortable. But at least there were 2 things. There was a fuel and there was a flame. The Ketoret represents the Holy of Holies, that's the highest level, where the Achtos between the fire, which represents Elokus, and the Ketoret, which represents the world, is not only that the fuel is burned in a peaceful way, the fuel and the fire become mamish one. They become one and the same thing. And of course we all understand, like it says in Chassidus, that all 3 of these levels exist in the avodah of every single person. They're called Chitzonius Halev and Pnimius Halev. There's the outer heart and the inner heart. And when it comes to the outer heart, you have 2 levels, right? The difference between the outer heart and the inner heart is the outer heart comes from the brain, and the inner heart comes from the neshama. So the outer heart has 2 levels, and the lower level, the outer heart, is fighting with L'umazeh. On a higher level, the outer heart is loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu as much as the Seichel understands. And the inner heart, this represents the Ketoret, the fire that he has in his neshama, which has a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is completely not from this world. It's not even from the human mind of a Yid. So this is my contribution to this evening. And we learned something about Beis Hamikdash. And of course we have to finish with a tefillah. I'm sure this has been pointed out. The rebbe always says whenever you get together, it has to be Teirat Tefillah Tzedakah. And one of the tefillahs that the rebbe would often refer to when the children got together by the rallies was the tefillah of She'ibana Beis Hamikdash B'meira B'yameinu V'sein Chalkeinu B'seir Secha. The Beis Hamikdash should be built now. I see a question here. So we have the 3rd Beis Hamikdash. What will be with the noise? The noise will still be there in the 3rd Beis Hamikdash. We'll just have a different explanation. Okay, I don't know who asked the question, but that's the answer. Every mitzvah that we have now, we're going to have Liyasod Lavi. Even those mitzvahs that we think we do because we're fighting with the Yetzer Hara, we're going to have Liyasod Lavi. But then it's going to be in a different madrega. The Rebbe spoke once, many times in the Sichos. One time, many times in the Sichos, right? After Mashiach comes, how come you have so many leisaseh? If the reason you're not allowed to do certain things is because there's klipa, and lost love, there's no klipa, there should be no leisaseh. So the Rebbe says in the Sikh, of Teireh Chadash B'Titeitze and others, that lost love, the leisaseh is not going to be to fight with a klipa. It's going to be the idea that when you want to get a higher level of godliness, the only keli you can get to have a higher level of godliness is a keli of not doing something. So every mitzvah we have now, we're going to have then. We're just going to explain it different. Okay, a gute Nacht and besudas tevis what Mashiach now. And thank you for letting me participate. Amen.